What's up, my family? Listen, first-time listener, or you've been here the whole damn time. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, giddy up, let's go, no notes.
That's my baby. That's my baby.
We're going at it at 110%.
I just want 5 minutes of happiness, please. Just give me 5 minutes.
And they scored! They did it!
Slap.
What the hell was that? Oh, yeah!
What the f*** are you talking about?
Hey there, hi there, hello there. We're with you again with another edition of Bowen On The Birds. Once again, they've failed to keep me off this platform. I don't know what the problem is, but, I'm going to take advantage of it. I'm here, and you're going to have to listen to me if you're tuned in. But we have other people for you to listen to as well. And first up today, as we get ready for Sunday's Dallas at the Eagles afternoon contest, we have Mike Sielski, the intrepid columnist from the Philadelphia Inquirer, one of the hardest working men in show business, guy who's always like writing books and doing long form pieces and writing 12 columns a day and being a dad. And it kind of makes me sick, really, when you think about it. But here he is. Let's get him up here and see what he has to say.
I'm here to make you sick, Les. How are you?
Yeah, you do, yeah. How are you?
I'm great.
So, big game this week. Obviously, the two best teams, I think, in the NFC, except for if San Francisco ever gets straightened out, maybe they are too. But the two that are the best right now. One thing, and you'll be able to tell my feeling from my framing of this. I think you get a lot of in the media right now is, especially national media. The Eagles are 7-1 and the fans aren't satisfied. What a bunch of, if you're watching the games, I don't think any fan, maybe if your team had been horrible for a bunch of years, you'd be real satisfied with this. But this is a team that was in the Super Bowl and should have won the Super Bowl last year. And if you're really watching the games, they delight in giving you, we're going to win, but we're going to do it in the most irritating way possible. I'd love to see the percentages on fumbling the ball away twice within the opponent's 5-yard line and how often you win doing that, And that's something, I bring that up right off the top because we're talking about a tough matchup with Dallas. And that's really my biggest concern is the Eagles very rarely this season have done more than just sort of stumble across the finish line against lesser teams. Are you thinking along those lines? What are you thinking about this game?
Yeah, I'm very much thinking along those lines, Les. And I've written this a couple of times kind of in passing in a couple of different columns about this team. But what I think you're getting at, it's the same thing that I think you're getting at, which is they're winning games because they are so talented and deep, and not because they're necessarily outperforming or out executing their opponents. And I think the fact that A.J. Brown has been on the streak that he's been on is kind of a testament to that. When all else fails, Jalen Hurts can throw the ball to A.J. Brown and he will catch it over the 2 or 3 cornerbacks who seem to be covering him on any play.
Get
and
out
everything
of jail
will be
free. Yes.
Yeah, and everything will be all right. And you're right. If you watch the Eagles week to week, you invariably end up saying to yourself, boy, this team is really good, but it's not playing at its best. And some of what you're talking about, I think, is a natural Philadelphia inclination to say, hey, my team didn't play perfectly, therefore there are major problems. You hear this in some of the public discussion about the Eagles running game, for instance, over the last few weeks. It's not as good as it used to be, blah, blah, blah. But mostly I think it's just they keep making these mistakes in a manner that they really weren't making them last year. And so I think your analysis of this game is correct. I think the Eagles are better than the Cowboys. I think the Eagles should beat the Cowboys. But the Eagles have this tendency to make a few mistakes every week. And if they make the wrong kind of mistakes at the wrong time, boy, their season really could change Sunday night.
Yeah, the margin for error isn't going to be what it was last week against the Commanders, certainly. But there was one thing you said there that I want to circle back on. I don't know if you saw this, but at Nick Sirianni's press conference today, he had a picture of Bob Knight, and he was he had told the team about a night English, not my native tongue. He had told the team about a Knight quote about the team that makes the fewest mistakes winning the game, and that I thought to myself, like, that hasn't been you very often, and I guess that's his message to the team, so at least subtly. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. And what's interesting about that anecdote is that immediately after showing the team that picture of Bobby Knight, Nick Sirianni threw a chair at Britton Covey. So to just complete the metaphor. But yeah, look, I think Nick's probably thinking along the lines of what we're talking about, that the team, and let's be honest here, when we talk about the team, a lot of what we're talking about is Jalen Hurts making these mistakes, right? He's thrown more interceptions
True.
than he did a year ago. He's fumbled a few times here. He's not responsible for all of it, don't get me wrong, but there's been an uptick in his turnovers, and that's some of what we're talking about here. But it's Nick, I think, was right to accent that. Look, we have to clean up these mistakes that we keep making over and over again, because we, the Eagles, are holding ourselves back. I mean, you fumble twice inside the 5-yard line against Washington, you can get away with it. You fumble twice inside the 5-yard line against Dallas, and it's going to be a different story.
Indeed. That's exactly true. Yes. We all have our different takes on what we see this year from the Eagles. And our former colleague, Paul Domowitch, has been for weeks all over the defensive backfield. And until last week, I was kind of like, Damo's being a little too, there's injuries back there. They're not giving up a lot of points. I don't think it's really as bad as he says. And then last week came along and it was like, holy crap, this is horrible. I don't know. I think they're going to have the same set of starters this week for the second week in a row, for the first time maybe all season. That's got to help, I guess. I wish Bradley Roby his shoulder would get ready. He's not on IR, and he's been gone a few weeks now, so this must be lingering more than they thought. But that to me is a big concern after last week. It just hasn't looked like a good setup back there. Speed has been a problem, except against Miami, the one team that everybody thought would just blow them away with speed. Somehow that didn't happen. I don't understand it. But do you think having the same set of starters, do you think they have the pieces in place back there to do this right, to do it well against Dallas?
I don't know. The last two games really puzzled me, where the game against Miami, that defense was so well coached against what Miami does offensively, right? It was almost like watching, it's funny, I just watched this the other day for something I'm doing down the road. There was and football fans may not be familiar with this, but when the Flyers played the Soviet Red Army team back in 1976, Fred Sherro, the head coach, advice to his team was, look, the Soviets are going to skate in circles all around. They're eventually going to have to come to you. So don't get out of your position and just wait for them to come to you. Okay. And I feel like that's exactly what the Eagles did last week against the Dolphins. The Dolphins are going to throw all this motion at you. They're going to get your eyes moving. They're going to get you moving. Don't worry about all that. Just be where you're supposed to be and we'll be fine. And they did it. And it worked out great. It was their best defensive performance of the season against what everybody thought was the best offense they were going to face all season. Then last week, I didn't understand what they were doing. You want to get pressure on Sam Howell, but part of the key to getting pressure and getting him off his spot is maybe jamming receivers at the line of scrimmage or playing tighter coverage. And it seemed to me that Howell could take 2 steps, plant his back foot, and get rid of a ball to an open receiver within 5 to 10 yards of the line of scrimmage anytime he wanted to. And I didn't understand, unless it was simply a matter of James Bradbury and Darius Slay couldn't cover, within those 5 yards. I didn't understand the scheme and the strategy and the results. So I'm concerned, like Damo is, I'm concerned like you are, that if they give Dak Prescott a little bit of time and CeeDee Lamb a little bit of room, they're going to have a tough time stopping that Dallas offense.
Yeah, I agree, certainly. And, one thing I saw last week, Mike, on that touchdown pass to the tight end, Logan Thomas, I'm certainly not an X and O maven or any kind of great critic of safety play, but Reed Blankenship gave him the inside, and it's something in goal. If it's me, I'm going to want to take the inside and make Sam Howell throw a fade to the back of the end zone and feather it in there somehow, rather than just having the receiver right there in front of Sam Howell so that he can just zip a pass. So many puzzling things. And someone suggested that they were in a coverage where Blankenship thought, something else was going to happen. I don't know. I don't know. That kind of stuff, really eludes me sometimes. But
I'll say this about that play, Les. I remember exactly the play you're talking about. And the layout at FedEx Field with that terrible press box.
Yes.
The Commanders were coming right at us in the press box toward that end zone. And from that look, it appeared that Howe kind of looked Blankenship off.
Okay.
And that Blankenship followed Howe's eyes toward what he thought might be exactly what you said, a fade of some kind or something to the far corner of the end zone. And then Howe almost did that kind of Matthew Stafford kind of thing where he looked like he, to a certain degree, like his eyes were this way, but he threw it kind of back that way. And the middle of the field was wide open for Thomas. And again, I'm like you, I'm not breaking down film every day. I'm not, I don't know exactly what coverage Blankenship was in, but it looked like Howe was able to move him with his eyes.
I see. Well, the big thing I see that's one thing that's troubling anyway, from extrapolating from the Miami game to this game, thinking, okay, they shut down one high-powered offense. Maybe they can do it again. There was a huge mismatch there with the Eagles defensive line and the Miami offensive line. And it didn't result in a huge number of sacks of Tua, but it certainly affected things, I think. I don't know if that's going to be the case this week. I don't. Dallas's offensive line isn't scary good, but it looks like it's getting healthier, and it's not bad. And after what we saw last week, frankly, the Eagles' defensive line, now I guess Jalen Carter is going to make a big difference this week. We better hope. I think they better hope he makes a big difference.
Yeah.
But, I think they really have to. That's my I'm kind of backing into my agree or disagree question this week, which is the Eagles' defensive line is going to have to just go out there and dominate this game from the first quarter to the fourth quarter. It's not going to be like show up in the fourth quarter and Hassan Reddick gets his key sack with 2 minutes left. That's going to have to happen all four quarters for the Eagles to win this game, because that's the best matchup advantage they have on the field. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, we got very used to seeing Jalen Carter play great very quickly. And it's noticeable when he's not out there.
Yeah.
And, Fletcher Cox has played pretty well this season, all things considered. But he's not the Fletcher Cox that he was in 2012 or 2018.
True.
And they're going to have to be better along that line. And, I wonder when we're going to see the entire defense kind of in sync, right?
Boy,
we haven't seen that yet. We've seen games where the defensive line provides a lot of pressure. We've seen games where the secondary played pretty well, like it did against Miami. We haven't seen it all together at once. In the middle of that defense, that's the worry if I'm the Eagles.
Yeah.
I mean, they really haven't been able to stop anybody throwing the ball over the middle of the field against them. And even Miami doesn't, part of the reason I think they were able to succeed against the Dolphins was that the Dolphins don't really want to do that. They want to chuck it deep to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and use the misdirection of running and things like that. Dak Prescott loves to throw to the middle of the field. Yeah. He loves to exploit that kind of marzipan middle there that the Eagles always seem to have. They had it under Jonathan Gannon, and they seem to have it now under Sean Desai. So, yeah, I think it's a concern. Like, I don't want to overstate this because I do think the Eagles are the better team, but there are vulnerabilities that seem to be exploitable for the Cowboys.
All righty. We have to go to commercial here, Mike, but if you'll hang on with us, we'll get more of your thoughts on the other side.
Sounds good.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
In our family, food is our daily bond. My nonna, affectionately called Mama by many, found solace and joy in the kitchen, sharing her love through delicious creations. She turned her culinary passion into a flourishing business alongside her husband and sons in 1983. Celebrating 40 years is a testament to our exceptional team, friends, family, and beloved customers. With gratitude, we look forward to the future, expanding our brand to share the highest quality Italian food and wine nationwide. Our heartfelt thanks to everyone who has played a part in our story. Grazie mille.
Hello again. We're back with the second segment of Bowen on the Birds with Mike Sielski, intrepid columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer, man about Doylestown. You have any more books coming up in the next couple months here, Mike?
I do. I have a deadline approaching at the end of December for my next book. It's about the myth and magic of the slam dunk.
Yeah.
Kind of a history of basketball, anecdotally, through players who were or moments that were renowned or connected to the slam dunk. So I'm finishing up a chapter on Connie Hawkins right now.
Oh, one of my favorite players. I loved that book about him that came out when I was in like middle school. Hawk. Yeah.
Foul.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Foul.
I've got it marked up, and the chapter is going to focus on actually his the only professional basketball championship he ever won, which was for the Pittsburgh Pipers in the first year of the ABA in 1968.
Well, I was an ABA kid living in Carolina, and the Cougars, had Billy Cunningham and some really good players. Every now and then, the Virginia Squires would come to town with that Irving fellow.
Never heard of him.
Turned out he wasn't Jewish after all. That was a joke I stole from Billy Crystal 50 years ago, by the way. Getting back to the Eagles, I guess we should talk about the Eagles.
Yeah, maybe.
I owe you an apology. Last week, you wrote a column about Jalen Hurts and his knee, kind of, hand-wringing a little bit. And then out of the game, in which I thought Hurts was tremendous, you kind of wrote another column about the knee. And when I saw it, I thought, oh, my God, here we go again. Jesus, people get hurt. But that wasn't really the headline. I don't think really captured your column. When I read your column, I thought, okay, I'm sorry, Mike. I'm sorry I had that reaction, even though you couldn't see my reaction.
That's right.
But it was like, okay, yeah, he made the right points. This knee injury thing, a couple points. One is, if you have a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, he's going to be playing with injuries, I think. I mean, we just have to accept that, The other is, if it is a bone bruise, and they say it's that, but I don't know. I mean, who knows what it's a murky business, the sports medicine NFL is. If it is a bone bruise, there's nothing, it's not like he could sit out this week and, oh boy, now he's great. It just has to heal on its own. But it is a concern, obviously. I mean, the shoulder thing last year is something I think about a lot because they came very close to just having their season over. We didn't know it at the time. They downplayed it at the time, but that was very close to being a catastrophic injury. But that's kind of the NFL. I mean, Kirk Cousins, not exactly dynamic quarterback, tears his Achilles, and suddenly your season looks different. I'm glad you keep that on the forefront, because things like that tend to sort of, when a player's dealing with an injury over a period of weeks, you sort of, okay, he's dealing with it, and I don't think for the player, it's not that cut and dry.
Yeah. And look, he's not at 100%, right? Like, you're right about how much they downplayed the shoulder last year. And one of the dynamics that's at play, I think, is there is an element within the Eagles, I think, of wanting to publicly anyway talk about Jalen as if he is beyond injury, right?
Yeah.
This was kicked around a bit at the end of last season.
Yeah.
Nick Sirianni and I actually had an exchange about this.
Yeah, I remember that well. Like, he's such a Superman that he's
Yeah.
gonna feel faster because of his attitude and his courage and his determination. No.
Right, exactly. And look, you and I have both covered situations. I think of, for instance, 2005 with Donovan McNabb, where he played the first 7 or 8 weeks of that season. In addition to all the turmoil that was going on with Terrell Owens, he was playing through most of that season with a tear in his groin, and then he tore it fully, and his season ended. So I'm very cognizant and aware of injuries to quarterbacks because, as you said, a season can turn with it, if it gets too severe. And the fact that he's out there and they complete or don't complete a long pass downfield to Devontae Smith, and Jalen is hustling down the field and he's kind of limping a little bit.
Yeah.
Everybody sees that, and whether that injury, whether it's a bone bruise or something else, whether it can get any worse or not get any worse, it's there, and people are aware of it, and you have to ask about it, and you have to get updates about
Absolutely.
it.
And it could affect, even if he can't make it worse, it can make him less elusive. It could cause him to take a hit that he wouldn't take normally. It does affect things. So you're right.
Yeah.
And I apologize.
No, you don't have to. I mean, look, you don't have to apologize. I get it. And I understand that we have kind of this. I was talking about this earlier today. We have this kind of trend or tendency among fans to recoil whenever reporters who cover a team ask questions that they don't like or that they think are irrelevant. Right. And sometimes those questions are just born out of the fact that if you're like you or me, we've been around long enough to see stuff.
Right.
And just because Jalen Hurts is out there and playing very well, certainly last week, doesn't mean that it's not an issue, and doesn't mean that it might not be an issue down the road. And so, it's something I think people should keep an eye on.
It's kind of like, I think sometimes with fans, injuries are sort of like mentioning a no-hitter during the no-hitter. It's like, if you don't mention the injury, no, we don't want to hear that.
Right. That's a good point.
It doesn't exist. Another thing going on with the Eagles this week, and I've found this very interesting, is suddenly Tyler Steen might be starting at right guard. And I know they drafted him in the 3rd round, and he's certainly a more athletic player than, Sua Opeta, who was undrafted several years ago out of Weber State. But Tyler Steen hasn't played hardly at all. He got in for about half a dozen snaps last week, and now he's going to be the starting right guard. They must really, two things. One is Cam Jurgens, even though he's practicing, he's going to need apparently a week at least to get back in the flow of things. They don't want to throw him out there against Micah Parsons, I guess, this week. The second thing is, I think they see that Opeta is kind of like a lot of guys that you bring in to fill in. He has an expiration date, and he's kind of reached it, especially with a hip injury that he suffered. He doesn't have much quickness to start with. He's mostly a mauler. He's a guy that sets bench press records, not quick of foot. I think the fact that he's not quick of foot has certainly affected their running game. So they're going to try something, and I hope they're not doing this kind of on a wing and a prayer, because 6 snaps doesn't tell me a whole lot about the guy. But obviously they see practice, and they know, they know more about Tyler Steen than I do. But are you surprised by this?
A little bit, yeah. The other thing we need to mention too is that, Steen has a background where he's played multiple positions on the offensive line. Cam Jurgens was a center who the Eagles moved to right guard this season, and then presumably are going to move back to center whenever Jason Kelce retires in 2031 or whenever that might be. So that's part of this too. I think they probably feel a measure of comfort with Steen, and I think you make a good point about the athleticism along the line. So much of their running game and the success of their running game And Isaac Seumalo was kind of underrated in this regard because he just didn't like talking to the media. So people couldn't ask him about it and talk to him about it. But those second level blocks on running plays that Kelce is known for, that Mailata can do, where they just create instant urban renewal out of linebackers and cornerbacks who might make a play on a handoff to DeAndre Swift or Kenny Gainwell. Steen probably has the ability to do that at this point more than Sui Opeta does or Cam Jurgens does. So they might be taking a chance here, but they also might be kind of swinging for the fences and saying, okay, we think Tyler can deliver the style of blocking that we really need to unleash our running game.
I guess my main concern was from what I understand, Dallas does a lot of twisting and stunning and trying to screw up what you thought was happening in front of you. And a rookie with 6 snaps behind him, I just see a high potential there for, him going to the wrong guy. And, I hope that's not what happens. I think, he was a very well-regarded player in the draft. I think getting him in the 3rd round, everyone considered that very good value. But we really haven't heard a great deal about him since then. He was going to compete with Cam Jurgens for the starting job at training camp. And that by like the 2nd week, that was over. That was a long time ago.
Yeah. So
maybe he's going to be really ready to rip, and it'll certainly be interesting to see. You won't find a tougher test, I think, than he's going to face this week. So
no, and you're right, and that's a good point with respect to the Cowboys' best defensive player, right, Micah Parsons. So much of the success that the Eagles had against Parsons in that first game the 2 teams played last season, the one at Lincoln Financial Field, was based on kind of fooling Parsons with what they were doing from a play calling and misdirection sort of standpoint, or even going right at him, putting him in coverage and things like that. And, is it harder to do that when you have a rookie at one of your offensive line spots?
Yeah. And the going right at him thing, you'd be surprised how often that works with that type of player, because what he's really good at is chasing and pursuing. He's not like, the strongest, heaviest guy. Is not like Sue or somebody sitting there in the middle.
Right.
You can go right at him. And I think that's something in sports over the years that it's interesting when people figure that out about a guy. When I covered the Flyers, I think Eric Lindros's career changed in the 97 finals when the Detroit Red Wings said, everybody's scared of getting knocked down by him, but if you can go right at him, he doesn't protect the puck very well.
Right.
And that was
and Vladimir Konstantinov neutralized him pretty much.
Yeah. So anyway, that's another aside. We've been to hockey and to basketball. So
how about it?
In this podcast. So what do you think offensively? What are the Eagles going to do? I think I'm never they have to run the ball guy. I get so sick of that 1980s mindset. You hear it on the post-game show until you just want to bash your head against the coffee table. There are a lot of people that just won't accept that that's not what the game is about in 2023. You don't have to run the ball at all, really. You need to pick up you need to be able to pick up a yard when you have to pick up a yard, and the Eagles are very good at that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I don't care if they never run the ball. But that having been said, you want to keep Dak Prescott off the field, and one of the things Dallas doesn't do well is stop the run. So I'm kind of thinking this might be a nice week to try some of that stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I would love to believe that they're going to run the ball, against the Cowboys less, but I'm like you. They don't want to do that. They just don't. It's not the way the NFL is nowadays.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. And I don't see the pendulum. I've thought at times that the pendulum might swing back to where teams built their defenses so much around speed and neglected size so much that a team could get away with really pounding the ball. But it's not looking that way throughout the league. So yeah, I think they're going to come out throwing it. I think they're going to, even if the Cowboys roll coverage to AJ Brown, I think they'll say, okay, well, we'll throw the ball to Devontae Smith, or we'll throw it to Dallas Goedert, or we'll get DeAndre Swift out in space and use him on a wheel route, or get him matched up on a linebacker somehow. They want to throw the ball.
Yeah,
And,
they do.
I think that's what they're going to try to do. It's certainly what they've tried to do the last couple of weeks, against Washington. Gosh, I think they're their lowest running output of the season. I might think about, if I were them, I might think about, and we just spent all this time talking about Jalen Hurts and his bone bruise in his knee, but I might try running Jalen early in the game just to put the fear of God in them that, hey, we are going to call this, and he is capable of doing this if we need to. And, just enough to put the Cowboys defense on its heels. But yeah, I think they're going to come.
Thought, yeah.
I think they're going to probably come out and throw it because that's who they are and what they do.
I think some first down runs might be what they need in this game. The reason the pendulum never really swings back is because of the rules changes that favor passing, and because it's so rare that you're going to pick up 40 yards on a run.
Right.
And you have to do so many things well. There's so many arcane rules now to put together a 15-play drive without taking a holding penalty or without, somebody lining up wrong or some crap, is just so hard. It slows the game down and it holds down the score. And if you're paying A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Jalen Hurts, then that's where the ball should go most of the time. But there are situations, I think, where maybe that's not the case.
Yeah, I think it's a break glass in case of emergency kind of situation for the Eagles when it comes to running the ball. It's nice to know from their part. It's nice to know that they can do that if they have to, but they don't want to. And for all the reasons you just said, I say this to fans all the time when they pound the table. Why don't they run the ball more? They're so good at it. They have these great running backs. They have this great offensive line. Just as you said, look at where they spent their money. Okay. Right. They spent their money on Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, and they're going to spend their money on Devontae Smith, and they spent it on Dallas Goedert, and they spent it on their offensive line, to pass block. Yes. And that's where they spend their draft picks. So put it out of your mind that they're here to ground teams into dust. Well
said, Mike. I'm going to let you get back to your Friday afternoon there in your palatial mansion in Bucks County. And I really do appreciate you doing this, and I look forward to whatever you have to say about the game this week.
Thanks, Les. I appreciate it. This was fun.
Take care. So we've come up on the second break. We're going to go to commercial here, and we're hoping to have Michael Gehlken from the Dallas Morning News when we get back.
In our family, food is our daily bond. My nonna, affectionately called Mama by many, found solace and joy in the kitchen, sharing her love through delicious creations. She turned her culinary passion into a flourishing business alongside her husband and sons in 1983. Celebrating 40 years is a testament to our exceptional team, friends, family, and beloved customers. With gratitude, we look forward to the future, expanding our brand to share the highest quality Italian food and wine nationwide. Our heartfelt thanks to everyone who has played a part in our story. Grazie mille.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom-reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And we're back for another segment of Bowen on the Birds. We don't have Michael Gehlken just yet, but we're working on that. Michael covers the Cowboys for the Dallas Morning News and does a very good job. He's an incredibly professional observer of the NFL. He did an excellent job before that covering the Chargers for a while, and then he even covered the Raiders when they were moving to Las Vegas, which was an interesting situation to have to parse. And then he ended up in Dallas, and he's been there a few years now. And I think a lot of his writing, I look to him to tell me what's happening and give me, the real spin on what's happening in Jerryland, which is a strange and wonderful place, as Eagles fans know. Looking at Dallas, very strange team. You watch them in some of the games that they've won, and you see a team that you think can't be beaten. I mean, they're rolling up ridiculous margins of victory. Everything looks in sync, very few weaknesses. And then you look at their 2 losses, and it's like some other team put on the uniforms and went out there. They don't even resemble the team that, just rolled over, embarrassed other teams. I'm looking forward to talking to Mike about what that means and how that's possible. I mean, we have our frustrations with the Eagles because we see them win without really hitting on all 8 cylinders. Dallas does hit on all 8 cylinders when it wins and then hits on no cylinders when it loses. And that's another kind of frustrating, I guess, for the Dallas fans. I've been paying some attention to what's happening out there this week. This offensive line is a concern for them. They've had some injuries. Tyron Smith, I guess, practiced today, perhaps not fully, but it's pointing toward him being healthy for Sunday, and I think that's a pretty big deal for them. Dak Prescott is actually having an excellent year after raising a lot of questions with some of his interceptions the last few years. I think he's completing passes at an extraordinary rate this year. They're not going downfield all the time. Certainly he does throw some layups, but very impressive numbers. Really not the kind of mistakes that Eagles fans are certainly hoping to see. You haven't seen a lot of those from Dak this year. A lot of those really terrible throws in hopeless situations. He kind of keeps it more under control, more under wraps. You still have to worry about him as a running threat. And that's impressive because he's not a young man anymore. This was the guy that came out of the Carson Wentz draft, if you remember that far back. And he's had his ups and downs. I've never been a huge critic. I've always thought, that guy, he seems like a real stalwart, team-oriented, genuine person. I know fans here love to see when the Cowboys quarterback throws interceptions. Obviously, that's funny, and it's fun to make fun of that. But as a person, I don't think there's a lot to make fun of there. I think he's a really a good representative of that franchise on and off the field. And I think a lot of him. So I think the Eagles have a pretty good challenge against him this week. I think one thing that might help is outside of CeeDee Lamb, I don't see receivers that really scare you. And that's something I think Jerry Jones has been criticized for in the Dallas media quite a bit, is their lack of ability to get a marquee receiver to play with CeeDee Lamb, which results in teams really being able to focus on Lamb. And I guess that's what the Eagles are looking to do this week. It's not as easy as it might seem because they play him in the slot a lot. You can't just put an outside corner on him and have that work. I'll be real interested in seeing what the Eagles' plan is. They certainly haven't given any tips in that regard. He's not exactly like Tyreek Hill. I don't think you can do exactly what you did with Hill and have it work this week. But we're still waiting for Michael Gehlken. We have a time difference situation there, and I hope he didn't get the wrong idea about what time I wanted him. I did say EDT, which we have for at least another day. So I'm going to try to find Michael, and maybe we can go to our final round of commercials here, producer Ralph Dell, and while I try to scare up Mike Gehlken for us.
Hats.com is the premier destination for quality and fashion-forward hats and more, with designs for every style and trend. Locally based and run by Philly sports team fanatics, Hats.com can help you elevate your hat John. Utilize the easy-to-use guides at Hats.com to find your perfect size and style, and shipping and returns are free. Hats.com. Find yourself in a hat. Use code Philly for 15% off your order. Hats.com.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom-reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And we're back for the final segment of Bowen on the Birds, and we still don't have Michael Gehlken. I have messaged him. I'm afraid we might have crossed wires there somehow, which is certainly something that happens in the media game, as it does in a lot of other areas of life. But big game this weekend, Eagles, Dallas, here at the Link. I think that's going to make a difference. I think the Eagles have a lot to prove, I think, against the Cowboys, even though the Eagles have the better record. Dak Prescott has done really, really well against the Eagles. I think he's 8-3. If you look at the series, it's kind of useless to me these last several years because so many of these games have been played at the end of the season when one or the other team is either locked into a playoff spot or totally out of the playoffs, and there's subs running around, and it's some of the statistical stuff is just kind of useless for that reason. But this game, you've got a healthy Dak Prescott, you got a healthy Jalen Hurts, only for the second time in their respective careers, face to face. So that's a big deal, and I think it'll tell us a lot. I don't think if the Eagles should lose this, I don't think it's the end of the world. I think it's more the end of the world for Dallas, which already has 2 losses. If Dallas loses this, Dallas is in big trouble, I think. And you get that kind of existential crisis you had when the 49ers went out and just embarrassed Dallas after a whole week of Jerry Jones and others saying, oh, this is a big game. We're really going to have to prove ourselves this week, which I don't think you ever want to say that. You might think it privately, but I think you want to keep the even keel approach that most coaches and players take and act like at least this is just one game, because it is just one game at this point in the year, and you've got to go out and play a whole lot more of them before your season's over with. So, I think if the Eagles lose this, they're 7-2, and they'll take a hit in terms of image and in terms of fan excitement. But their season certainly isn't in any kind of danger at 7-2. They are heading into the roughest stretch of the season, the roughest stretch any team is going to face this season, according to the schedule makers. And starting that off with a loss would be less than optimal. And, you want to get that going with a win. Then you want to get your bye week. Then you want to be ready for Kansas City and go from there. You don't want to go into the bye off a loss. All that having been said, I think it's going to be a tight game. The Eagles that we saw last week weren't really ready for this kind of contest. There has been some healing, most notably of Jalen Carter since then, but there's going to have to be a lot of tightening up, penalty-wise, execution-wise, red zone-wise. Even though the stats were better last week, they still did some odd and puzzling things in the red zone. You can't waste any downs. You can't waste any turnovers. You can't waste any opportunities against a good team in your division, which is what this is. And I think the Eagles are going to have to be the most efficient they've been this season to win this game Sunday. I do think that's certainly within their powers to do, but they haven't done it yet. And, it'll be quite comforting to see that if it happens. From the Dallas standpoint, they've had 2 losses that they certainly didn't expect, but they've played well on the other side of those losses. And reading the media down there, I just get an idea that losses go away quicker out there than they do here. it's almost like those losses didn't happen. And if you saw the team play well last week, then they're ready to win the Super Bowl, And I don't think it's quite like that around here. I don't think we're that kind of fan base, but a little more of the look on the bright side outlook in Dallas, which is kind of extraordinary to me because everybody knows no Super Bowl since 1995. A whole lot of teams since then that looked really good and that went into the playoffs with high hopes and didn't do anything. So I would be a little more of a cynic, I think, if I were a Dallas fan than some of them seem to be, or even a Dallas media person. But what do I know? It's, they choose to go along with Jerry. They love Jerry's personality. And to me, it's Jerry's personality is the biggest thing keeping this team from being successful. I still can't get over the fact that after every game, Jerry has a press conference and all the reporters crowd around and ask him, what he thought of the call on 3rd and 3 in the second quarter. And he criticizes his coach or his players. You're not going to see Jeffrey Lurie do that or any other owner in the National Football League. And this is why Dallas hasn't had a real cutting edge, genius type coach since Jimmy Johnson left, because nobody wants to work under those circumstances. No real, up and coming coach wants to work under those circumstances. You get a retread like Mike McCarthy. You get Jason Garrett and people like that you hire from within. And it sounds like, though, if producer Ralph Dell is telling the truth, that we have Michael Gehlken. So let's bring him on up here. There he is in the flesh.
How you doing?
Mike, what's going on out there?
How are you doing?
Just great.
I'm doing well. I'm actually.
Hey, who's that in your lap?
Got here a little.
Who's that fella?
This is my daughter, actually, Tatum.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I just could see the top of the head, and I didn't know if you had more than one kid. I knew that you had a daughter. So, yeah, Tatum just got done with Halloween. I believe we were messaging about that the other day. Exciting Halloween for Tatum?
I think so. It's probably, she's only 7 months, so I think the measure of her understanding what Halloween is pretty, it's as much in its infancy as she is. So we had grandparents send her a couple of Halloween costumes. So we had multiple outfits for her, and we trick-or-treated at one house next door. So we could say that we did it, and she could say hello, but otherwise kind of like a normal weekday around the house.
Well, even when they get like bigger and kind of able to walk and go trick-or-treating, I found you kind of have to explain the whole deal, because our first kid, I'll never forget, our son, Matt, we dressed him up in whatever costume he was in, and he was real happy about this. I said, well, go up to this front door here of the people across the street. And he goes up to the front door and knocks, and he comes back with this bag, and he's shaking the bag. He says, Daddy, they gave me candy. So he wasn't clear that this was part of the deal. He thought he was just going to go around in a costume and say hi to people. And the candy turned out to be a bonus.
That's funny.
But anyway, we probably need to talk about the game this week, or the people at A2D are going to get angry with me. The latest on Tyron Smith. Do you think you're going to have a healthy offensive line going into this game Sunday?
Boy, his health is really hard to anticipate. In week 3 against the Cardinals, the Cowboys thought they had him. And then Mike McCarthy holds practice, a light practice, obviously, the day before games. And so on the Saturday before the Sunday game, he aggravated an old knee issue, and he missed that game, and he missed the one that followed. And then this past week, the Cowboys thought that they were going to have Tyron Smith coming off a bye in the Thursday practice leading up to a game against the Rams. He aggravates a neck issue, gets a stinger, and he's out for that game. He was very close to playing that game. The fact he was so close gives me belief that there is a real chance he does play Sunday against the Eagles. But because it's Tyron Smith, you really just can't say for sure durability, unfortunately, has not been on his side over the past handful of years. But when he is healthy, he's so athletic still in his pass, in his jump. He gets in his pass set. He's so violent with his hands. Really differentiates himself in that area. He's every bit the 8-time Pro Bowl left tackle you expect when he's on the field. But again, that's kind of the caveat is when he's on the field.
And for Eagles fans who aren't watching Dallas that closely, what's the deal if he doesn't play? It's not Jason Peters anymore.
No, it's not. So Chumadoga, who actually exited the fourth quarter of the game, he was the player who started for Tyron Smith last week. And so the Cowboys expect to have either Smith or Adoga, or perhaps both Smith or Adoga. It doesn't seem to be a scenario where neither is available. We're going to have the injury report here momentarily. I would expect both players to be questionable, certainly Tyron Smith to be questionable. But I think there's a real chance that both those players are active on Sunday.
Good. Okay. I want to ask you about, the one injury that I thought would really be a problem for Dallas was Trevon Diggs. And lo and behold, Deron Bland, whom I wasn't real familiar with, has stepped in there and been lights out, kind of, right? Am I parsing this correctly?
No, yeah, absolutely. He's performed very well. And honestly, when the Cowboys lost Trevon Diggs inside the building, obviously it's a huge loss. This is someone who a couple years ago had 11 interceptions, something that hadn't been done in the NFL in 4 decades. So and Trevon Diggs looked the best that he has in his entire NFL career. More physical, more patient. I think playing opposite Stephon Gilmore was really good for him. So it was a loss. But in the same breath, the Cowboys knew that they had Deron Bland. They knew they could slide him from nickel to his natural spot on the boundary and just feel really, really comfortable with it. So the stress that losing Trevon Diggs placed on the cornerback position was less about having to move Bland outside. It was more about having to move Bland outside so soon in the year. And that makes you one step closer to it being a problem in terms of tapping into your cornerback depth. But right now, Cowboys feel really great about Deron Bland. He's got 3 pick sixes, 4 interceptions. Yeah. Last year, he had 5 interceptions as a rookie. So again, not totally new to the scene. But his 9 interceptions since entering the NFL as a 5th-round draft pick last year are most in the NFL in that span. So Cowboys are really impressed with Bland. He's really a quiet guy. Nothing's too big for him. He just kind of rolls with things and he doesn't ride the roller coaster of a game. And so you just see him if as he very well might, if he allows up a big play on Sunday to AJ Brown or anyone else, you'll just see the motion be very steady, and don't be surprised if you see him respond in a positive way soon thereafter, because he just doesn't go into the tank after something like that.
All right. I have a kind of a general question that might be hard for you to answer. I was going over this with the fans on my own before we got you on here. Dallas, to me, I watched some of the games that Dallas has won, and it looks like the best team in the league. I mean, rolling up these enormous margins of victory. It doesn't seem to be a weakness. And then I watched the 2 games they lost, and it's like somebody else came in and put on the uniforms. And, it's such a disparity in terms of the play of what is obviously a very, very talented team. What did you see in those 2 losses? What happened in those games to make it such a different team than it has been mostly?
Yeah, well, I think 2 different things happened. So one, week 3 against the Cardinals, Cowboys were down 3 of their 5 starting offensive linemen. Difficult to win this league when you're missing 60% of your starting offensive line.
Right.
But they actually ran the ball pretty well. They averaged more than 5 yards a carry, and it's the only time they've done it all season long. Dak Prescott, certainly the clock in his head was ticking, and it did have an impact on the passing game, but they were able to run the football pretty well. The issue that game was their run defense gave up 3 explosives in the first half, and they had a really tough time recovering collectively as a team. And so the defense needed to pick up its game for the offensive line, and I don't think blocking per se was the reason why the Cowboys lost, but it was the defense's failure to carry the load when they needed to. That was the issue week 3. And then a couple games later, against the San Francisco 49ers, they just got throttled. I mean, it's hard to really put a finger on as colossal of a collapse as it was when you lose 42-10 as Dallas did. And so they just got outclassed. They got out schemed. They got out executed. They couldn't put a drive together offensively. Third down, they were terrible. It was just a butt kicking. So I think those were the ones that, and I think there was a lot of hype, no doubt, surrounding that Cowboys 49ers game, because it'd been 2 straight postseasons where the Cowboys went home early because they ran into the 49ers. And so that was the game that everyone had circled on their calendar, and then they went out and just laid another egg. So that is kind of what makes this game so interesting, is that there's a lot of hype inherently on a Cowboys-Eagles matchup. And it's a big game if you're the Cowboys, because right now you're a game and a half back in the NFC East. And if you win this game, now you're a half game back, and the Eagles are on their bye. And then if you win your next game at home against the Giants, which you really ought to, considering you shut them out week 1 at their place. So suddenly you beat the Eagles and you take care of the Giants, you're in a tie for first place in the NFC East. You have the head-to-head tiebreaker. So I know Dad's right. Then the Cowboys are going to be first place in the division. He's
agreeing,
Yeah. So that's the stakes. And so I think it's a little bit different in terms of the Niners game, because it's okay. This is a big game. They've ended our season, and it's all this emotion. I think it's much more practical. Where all right, this is a division game, and we understand what this means for us at the end of the season to get to where we want to be in the tournament team.
Yeah, with that Niners game, Michael, I felt I was watching a lot of what was being said and written there, and I was kind of like wincing at, Jerry, like this is a really big. This will tell us, where we are. It was an early season game. And my thing was, if you lose this, you have to play again. It's not, maybe you think internally that this is a huge game, but I just have found teams tend not to go there, especially early in the season with this is the game. We have to win this game. It just doesn't seem like a good way to go into something. And maybe it wasn't. I don't know.
I think they didn't want to be naive to who they were facing. Like they wanted to acknowledge that this is not just like any other game. It counts the same in terms of an NFC opponent, but they really needed to just call it what it was. And so they were very honest about it. Maybe if they could do it again, maybe they wouldn't be as honest, but I think it would have been a little insulting to carry on throughout the week. Like this wasn't so personal, because it was, and which made the loss that much more of a is this this is a team that just got exposed. Like how do they move on from this?
Right. But they have moved on. They've moved on very well.
And the 49ers
moved on very well.
You're 2 straight, and the 49ers are 0-3 since then. So that's the NFL.
Yeah. How about that? Yeah. I'm going to let you get back to parenting in just a minute here, Michael, but I have one more thing for you. Micah Parsons, wonderful player. I don't know if it's because of his Penn State roots or what, but he's the only prominent Dallas player I can ever remember who spends a lot of time talking about the Eagles. The shtick on that rivalry here has been for years that Eagles fans and Eagles players considered it a huge rivalry, but in Dallas they were kind of like, there are other teams we care about more. It's not really that big a deal to us. But every time I look at, social media or something, Micah Parsons has something to say about the Eagles. It's, do you get that sense from him that that's a big deal for him?
I get the sense that Micah Parsons has a lot to say about a lot of different things.
Good point.
Okay. And I think the Eagles are no exception. But he talks about the media. He talks about basketball players and teams. Mm-hmm. He's wearing different jerseys at different games and has people scratching their head at different times. So he's, I think when he's on, and it's kind of funny because if you get him away from camera, he's not like super, trying to think of the word in terms of personality type. I always draw a blank on it, but like
voluble or
like he's not super extroverted. He's kind of maybe an ambivert or even an introvert. And but when he's in front of the camera, he goes, he puts it on, and it's not an act per se, but he just kind of has that in him. But then I think he kind of shuts it back down. And so it would be a mistake to think that Micah Parsons is just this guy who's just running his mouth everywhere it goes. He's just extremely competitive, and he loves sports. He loves competition. And so he respects the Eagles and what they've accomplished. He has a whole lot of respect for Lane Johnson and that offensive line. He studies the game, and he respects the greats who do it. So I don't think it's coming from a place of, like simple rivalry of, I play for the Cowboys and I hate the Eagles. Like, that would be really superficial. And that's not what Parsons is. He's thoughtful, but he's competitive. And again, he just loves the game and understands the giants within it.
Understandable, yes. And obviously there's the fact that the Eagles could have drafted him, and that's still a hot topic of debate around here. Although Devontae Smith has done well, they also have A.J. Brown, and, there are a lot of people who think they've been better off with Micah Parsons and A.J. Brown, but we'll never know, I guess. Well, I really appreciate this, Michael. I'm sorry that, you're kind of in dire circumstances there, but I really appreciate you doing it, and I hope you have a good trip up and, have fun in our city.
Thank you. Fatherhood, I'm constantly under dire circumstances. But,
I know what that's like. Yes.
I know it.
But take care, and thanks again.
All right. My pleasure. Take care.
That will do it for this week's Bowen on the Birds. Eagles Dallas, 4:25 Sunday afternoon. And we're looking forward to dissecting that next week on another edition of your favorite podcast. Thanks much.